He was the richest man in Abuja, and the only person he trusted that night was the quietest nurse on the floor. Thunder rolled like empty fuel drums across the city as Prime Care Specialist Hospital thinned to whispers, and Zainab Okoye, first to arrive, last to leave, the one colleagues called boring because she preferred pulse charts to politics, sat beside a motionless giant wired to machines. Perfume trails from earlier VIP chaos had faded. Heels and gossip had retreated to the call room. Security sealed the ICU door. Zainab stayed. She warmed water in a kidney dish, wiped dried blood from a temple scar, dabbed moisturizer onto cracked lips, and checked the slow climb of oxygen saturation blinking green. On the bed lay Chief Suleiman Karim, oil, construction, and rumors, his beard grayed at the edges, his breath thin as a thread pulled through cloth. The minute hand hopped to 2:13 a.m. when his fingers twitched. Zainab stood, steady as a metronome. His eyes opened, clouded, startled, human. "Water," he rasped. She held a straw, coached a sip, another, then listened for the rasp to soften. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Zainab," she said. "Your nurse. I've been here." He scanned her face as if searching a map for a safe road. Then, "Don't let them near me." "Who?" "Them. Staff, family, my people. I can't trust them." Fear lived under the gravel of his voice. Zainab didn't argue. She adjusted his pillow and tightened the cannula. "You're safe," she said, meaning it the way a lighthouse means light. Rain softened against the windows. A generator coughed, then settled. In the corridor, an elevator sighed. "Stay," he said, suddenly firm. "Not the matron, not the sons, you." Zainab felt the room tilt, not from power, but from responsibility clotting in the air. "I will," she answered. At 3:40, the monitors steadied into a patient lullaby. At 4:10, the storm thinned to mist. At 5:05, a bird tested morning with a single note. The door pushed open, and Matron Funke leaned in, her gaze measuring this odd gravity. "You're still here?" "Yes, ma," Zainab said, logging vitals. "You don't flinch around people like him. Do you know what he can do with a signature?" Zainab glanced at the man, then back. "I just see a patient." Matron Funke's mouth pressed into a coin, and she left. Silence returned, the kind that lets truth come close. At 5:57, Chief Karim shifted, eyes clearing like Harmattan skies after wind. "Do you believe in second chances?" he asked. The question felt heavier than the IV pole. Zainab didn't consult a rule book. "Yes." "Good. Then I need yours." He closed his eyes as if bracing for a memory's impact. She checked the drip rate, examined the bruising along his forearm, and waited, choosing patience over curiosity. When he spoke again, his voice was closer to himself. "I built towers," he said, "but I slept like a man under a leaking roof." The monitors kept time. "Do you know who I am?" "You're Chief Suleiman Karim," Zainab said gently. "That's what they call me. It is not who I am." He reached for her hand, his fingers trembled against her glove. "Don't believe what they tell you about me." "I don't listen to gossip," she said, covering his hand with her other palm, the way she steadied frightened patients in casualty. "Don't trust them either," he added, breath thinning. "They smile like hosts at a banquet and count chairs for the inheritance." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "They will come with papers."
The clock tipped past 6. Light crept in slats through the blinds and laid gold ladders on the tiled floor. Outside, the city began to rehearse its noise. Inside, Zainab adjusted the cuff and felt something shift, not affection or awe, but a sober knowing that his plea had tied her to a story larger than her shift. "Rest," she said, smoothing the blanket. "We'll handle morning when it gets here." His lashes fluttered. "Stay until it does." And while Abuja awoke hungry for news, while perfumes and press releases would soon gather like harmattan dust in the hall, the richest man in the city fell asleep holding the hand of a nurse who didn't want his name, only his numbers steady and his fear quiet. By noon, the hospital had the hum of a marketplace and the manners of a courtroom. Whispers traveled faster than lab results. Chief Suleiman Karim had opened his eyes and asked for the quiet nurse from night shift. The VIP corridor brightened with polished shoes and colognes that announced their owners before they arrived. 3 men in suits conferred near the nurses' station. A woman with a headscarf and sunglasses spoke into 2 phones at once. A lawyer hugged a leather folio the way a diver hugs air. Matron Funke moved them back with authority, but every gaze slid to the ICU door where Zainab stood charting. When she went in, Suleiman's voice was sanded down but clear. "They've come to count what I haven't buried," he said, eyes on the blinds. "Before they bring papers, I will tell you why you must guard me from them." He nodded toward the bed's shadow. "Under there." Zainab knelt, fingers finding a small black pouch taped beneath the frame. Inside, a silver key cold as a secret, a thick brown envelope edged soft by time, and a photograph. Young woman in a faded wrapper, an infant tucked to her chest, a smile that looked like home. "Her name was Halima," he said, the syllables careful, reverent. "I loved her before I learned how to translate love into invoices. My family called her beneath us. I let pride be my interpreter. I gave her a house outside town, promised to return, then hired men to deliver excuses in envelopes." His breath faltered. "She carried my child. I carried my name." Zainab slid a chair closer, the photograph face up between them. "Find her," he said. "If she's gone, find my daughter." The corridor murmured. Heels gathered like weather. The door swung open without a knock. "Baba," said the tallest of the suited men, jaw tight, wristwatch loud. "It's Farouk." Matron Funke reached for the door, but he was already inside, a lawyer at his shoulder. "We came straight from Maitama. There are hospital documents and a simple update to the will." "No," Suleiman said, the word heavier than his weight. "Later is fine," the lawyer tried, smiling at Zainab as if she were furniture with ears. "Now is never," Suleiman answered. Farouk's smile thinned. "Baba, you're being unreasonable. We need signatures, billing, consent, things beyond the nurse's understanding." "Give any paper to Nurse Zainab first," Suleiman said, turning his head with the effort of a man lifting a gate. The room cooled. Farouk measured the nurse as a problem that should not exist. "Since when do we let night shift screen family business?" "Since family arrived with business before questions," Suleiman said. "If she leaves, you leave." The matron blinked. Zainab didn't move. She felt the moment attached to her like a badge and a target. Farouk stepped close enough for her to see the fatigue in his bravado. "You will regret this," he whispered to his father, but the threat wilted under the beep-beep truth of machines that did not care for surnames. He signaled the lawyer who placed the folio on the side table with theatrical reluctance. "We'll be outside," Farouk said, sharpening the word outside into exile. The door clicked, air returned. Suleiman's hand hovered over the photograph without touching it, as if contact might restart a clock he had stopped. "You are wondering why I trust you," he said to Zainab. She shook her head. Wondering wasn't useful. Tasks were. "I'm wondering how far the house is and whether anyone is watching the road." A tired smile tugged at him. "Zaria Express to the turn before Kajini. A caretaker, Bala. The key fits the front. The back room will need a prayer and a firm hand." He coughed. She steadied his shoulder and watched the pulse flutter beneath translucent skin. "They will try to follow you," he continued. "Don't use your name. Don't tell them what you carry. Enter, lock the door, and read what Halima left when I taught her to expect nothing." Zainab tucked the key, the envelope, the photo into her bag the way she would tuck away a blood sample, secure, labeled by memory. "If she is alive, I will ask her for a mercy I do not deserve," he said. "If she is gone, bring my daughter," he answered, eyes sudden with water. "Let me apologize in a language not written by lawyers." The intercom cracked to life. "ICU consult in 5," and died. Zainab checked the drip, rewound the monitor cable, wrote a note tight and exact. "I'll need 2 days," she said. "I'll tell the matron you requested continuity of care." "No," he said. "They will sniff at that. Call in sick. Quiet sickness saves the truth." The corner of her mouth lifted at the grim humor, then flattened at the knock that followed. The door eased open just enough for Matron Funke to slide through. "We're managing the corridor," she said, her eyes taking in the folio, the bag, the way the air had changed shape. "But the press smells something." Suleiman pointed to the folio. "Any document comes to Nurse Zainab first." Matron Funke looked between patient and nurse, choosing allegiance to health over pedigree. "Understood," she said, surprising them both. When she left, Zainab exhaled into the space where decisions become plans. She set alarms for meds, adjusted the blinds, and, for the first time since her mother died, prayed out loud, not for miracles, but for timetables, for clear roads, for rooms that open and tell the truth. Outside, Farouk's voice rose, clipped and public. Inside, the richest man in Abuja closed his eyes like a pen at the end of a sentence and trusted the quiet nurse with the next paragraph.
At first light, Zainab left the hospital by the staff gate with a surgical mask high on her face and a headscarf she rarely wore, the black pouch flattened and the lining of her tote like contraband, and took a keke to the motor park, where voices threw destinations like fishing nets, Dudse, Guagua, Day, until she heard Kagini one more and slid into the back seat, eyes down, phone off, name folded small. The city unspooled, flyovers giving way to low shops with corrugated roofs, pepper sellers rinsing red in plastic basins, a boy chasing a tire along the shoulder. And by the time the driver tapped the brakes at a dusty junction, Zainab had rehearsed 3 versions of a story that revealed nothing. "You reach here," he said. She paid, crossed to a kiosk with a blue door and a radio muttering high life, and asked a man sweeping bottle caps if you knew Bala, the caretaker. "Bala Carpenter or Bala Musk," he said. "Caretaker," she answered, showing him the corner of the photograph, just the wrap edge, not the faces. He pointed with his broom. "Yellow bungalow after the mango." Bala opened to a cautious inch, his palm a map of old work and turpentine. At the name Chief Suleiman, his eyes tightened, not in surprise, but in recognition of a debt that had learned to wait. Inside, the room smelled of wood shavings and kerosene. "He's sick," Zainab said plainly. "He sent me." She didn't mention the envelope or the key until Bala asked if Chief had finally remembered how to say please. On the walk out, red dust ghosted their ankles. Children sang a skipping rhyme about rain, and dogs pretended not to notice strangers. The compound crouched behind a low wall the color of tired cream. Someone had swept the path recently, neat strokes that ended where the front step began. Bala's copy of the gate key turned with a hollow clack. Vines let go of the fence as if they'd been holding their breath. In the sitting room, sunlight threaded through lace and made patterns on a brown sofa. A crocheted runner held a glass ashtray that had only ever known chalk dust. "I sweep, I clear cobweb, I shut it again," Bala said, voice soft in the house that listened. "Nobody live." Zainab moved the way she did around the recently bereaved, hands careful, eyes cataloging. Framed photographs along a shelf had bleached at the edges. A young woman with cheekbones sunlight trusted, a baby in a knitted cap. The suggestion of a man's shoulder cropped out by a past that didn't want witnesses. "There was a back room," Bala said, glancing down the corridor. "She lock it the day she left. I no open." Zainab took out the silver key, cold and certain, and felt the small tremor in her fingers as it met the old brass. The lock resisted like a habit, then gave. Dust rose in slow astonishment. A narrow bed held its shape under a starched sheet. Beside it, a small drawer wore a folded scarf the color of tamarind. On the wall, crayon constellations, flowers with too many petals, a stick family holding impossible hands, a square house under a round sun, survived in stubborn brightness. Zainab opened the drawer. Letters waited in bundles tied with ribbon that had long ago learned to be patient. She untied one and read, "Halima to Suleiman," written in a script that refused to beg. "You left with your promises neatly ironed. Our child asks for the sound of your name, and I have only silence to offer." Another, "Men came with money and papers. They spoke as if I were a door to be pushed. I will not be moved by currency that does not apologize." Beneath the letters, a wooden box seeded its secret. A one-eyed cloth doll, a single pink sandal polished by small running, a clinic card from a mission outpost with vaccination ticks, and under that, the gravity she'd come for, a birth certificate wrapped in brown paper. Zainab unfolded it on her knee. Name, Layla Halima Karim. Date of birth, 03 June 1996. Father, Suleiman Karim. Mother, Halima Yusuf. The room tilted and steadied. Somewhere a lizard clicked approval on a windowsill. "She had a name," Zainab whispered, and the syllables felt like filling a lung you didn't know was collapsed. Bala leaned in, his breath catching on the edge of the paper. "Small Layla," he said, as if the name had been sitting behind his teeth for years. "After those men came, Madame Halima stayed quiet like a drum someone sits on so it won't speak. Then one morning she go, no note, only padlock." "Did she tell anyone where?" Zainab asked. Bala shook his head, then hesitated. "Mama Safia, the midwife near the borehole, used to come. If story remained anywhere, it remained in her mouth." Zainab rewrapped the certificate, slid it and a handful of letters into a document sleeve, and replaced the others exactly as she'd found them, honoring the order grief had chosen. In the mirror, she caught her reflection, mask pulled down to her chin, eyes ringed by a night's vigil, a woman who had come to dust and found a person. She locked the room, pressed the key into her palm until it left a crescent, and followed Bala back through the narrow corridor. Outside, the light had sharpened. Voices rode on it. "People mind their business here," Bala said, opening the gate. "But business sometimes minds people." Zainab nodded, tugged her scarf forward, and rehearsed a new truth. Layla exists. Next step, find the keeper of doors. As they parted, Bala lifted 2 fingers in a blessing shaped like habit. "Nurse," he said, testing the word like a vow, "go early, ask gently, and if anybody asks you why you came, say you came to sweep." The path to the borehole cut through hibiscus and gossip, and Zainab walked it with her scarf low and her mind high, repeating the name that had turned a locked room into a compass: Layla. Children clapped a skipping rhyme and paused mid-chorus to watch the stranger pass. A rooster crowed as if to stamp the hour into the dirt. Bala had pointed her here with a carpenter's certainty. If any mouth kept the story safe, it is Mama Safia's. The midwife's compound was a chalk-white square with a neem tree casting one large, generous shade. A red goat dozed on a rope. A basin of rinsed cloths breathed sun and soap. Zainab knocked. Wood answered under her knuckles, then an old voice, clear as a bell that still calls to prayer. "Who?" "A nurse," Zainab said, "from Abuja." The gate creaked. The woman who opened it wore the years like a beaded crown, blue wrapper, headscarf tied purposeful, wrists thin but steady. Her eyes made a quick map of Zainab, the tote, the shoes too city, the dust on the hem that said she had already gone where she was not expected. "I am looking for Mama Safia," Zainab said. "You have found her," the old woman replied, stepping aside. The sitting room was a museum of use, a kerosene lamp, a baby scale with a faded sticker, a ledger fat with names written in careful strokes. "Sit," Mama Safia said, not yet asking why. Zainab sat on a wooden stool and placed the photograph on the table face down, a gesture of respect to a story that might hurt when turned over. "I came about a woman who once lived near the edge of the village, Halima." The name drew a soft inhale from the room itself. "Everyone comes late for Halima," the midwife said, her voice neither accusing nor forgiving. "Men with soft shoes, women with hard words. You are neither." Zainab held her gaze. "I am not here with papers," she said. "I am here with regret that isn't mine and a promise that is." Silence tested her. Outside the goat sneezed. Somewhere a radio tried to pull in Lagos with more static than city. "Show me what you brought," Mama Safia said at last. Zainab slid the birth certificate across. The old woman put on glasses that magnified her patience and read aloud, under her breath, the name that the house had whispered, Layla Halima Karim. When she looked up, her eyes were wet and hard at the same time. "I cut this cord," she said, one hand on her belly, as if memory were anchored there. "I told Halima to speak the father's name into the room so the child would not grow up doubting her right to it. She spoke it once, like a secret she was willing to risk for her daughter, and then she wrapped the baby and told me not to repeat it where snakes could hear." Zainab exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding air for another woman's courage. "You know why I am here," she said gently. "I know," the midwife answered, and the years arranged themselves on her face into a map of before and after. "Halima is gone." The words landed with the clean mercy of a cut that has to be made. 6 rainy seasons now, fever that did not listen to herbs or prayer. We put her in the ground as dawn opened its first eye. I tied a white cloth to the neem so Layla would find the wind if she could not find a way to cry. The room swayed and steadied around the fact. Zainab nodded, grief moving through her like respectful weather. "Layla?" she asked. "Where did she go?" Mama Safia's mouth tightened, as if bracing against the old knock of city men with envelopes. "Why should I tell you?" Zainab did not reach for persuasion. She reached for truth.
because the man who failed them is failing now in a bed that won't be fooled by money. He wants to say sorry with his mouth, not through a lawyer, because a daughter should be allowed to choose whether to hear it. The old woman studied Zainab's face for hunger, the kind that eats headlines, found none, and nodded once. She stood, walked to the ledger, turned pages stained by years and babies, and stopped. After her mother died, Layla took her mother's surname, Yusuf. She went to the next town, small clinic on the highway. She does not use the father's name. It burned her tongue when she tried. She wrote on a scrap, clinic name, turnings, a landmark only locals would trust, and slid it across. Then she reached for Zainab's hands and trapped them between palms that had coached 1,000 first breaths. "Listen to me," she said, eyes bright as if the neem were reflecting the sky into them. "You will not go at night. You will not say the Father's name until she says her own first. You will not bring men who smell like power. You will not promise what you cannot keep." Zainab nodded after each command, letting them settle like stitches in fabric that must hold. "If she spits," she added, softer, "let her. Spit is cheaper than a broken heart." A shadow crossed the doorway. A boy peered in and vanished when the midwife glanced his way. "People mind their business here," Mama Safia said, echoing Bala. "But business grows ears. Leave by the back. Tie your scarf like a widow ties time. Carry water. Carry patience." Zainab rose, slid the slip of directions into the document sleeve with the certificate, and tucked both into the bag lining, where the black pouch lay like a heartbeat. At the threshold she hesitated. "If she refuses to come?" The midwife's smile was not unkind. "Then the choosing will still be hers, and that is a kind of healing." She touched Zainab's shoulder in benediction. "Tell Layla that when she was born, she came with her fingers stretched, as if she had already decided to reach for what was not handed to her. Tell her that I still keep a bowl of water by the neem on her birthday." Zainab promised, stepped into the hot noon, and let the gate close behind her with the quiet of a secret that has decided. The road to the highway clinic shimmered with heat, like a mirage deciding whether to stay. Zainab rode pillion on a motorcycle, scarf tight, bag tighter, the slip from Mama Sofia tucked against the birth certificate, as if paper could keep courage from evaporating. The driver pointed with his chin when a low white building appeared ahead, its blue hand-painted letters promising mercy more than miracles. Inside the waiting room were 3 plastic chairs, a mother humming to a feverish toddler, and a teenager cradling his bandaged wrist as though it were a fragile bird. A desk fan clicked with each revolution, as if reminding time not to rush. "Good morning," Zainab said at the counter. "I'm looking for Nurse Layla Yusuf." The receptionist glanced up, suspicion and kindness wrestling briefly in her eyes. "She's with a patient. You can sit." Zainab sat, palms damp, rehearsing the first sentence and the last. "My name is Zainab. The choice will be yours." A door squeaked. A woman stepped out in scrubs the color of early rain, lean, composed, with Halima's cheekbones and a gaze that did not waste itself. "You asked for me?" she said. "I'm Layla." Zainab stood. "I'm Zainab Okoye, a nurse from Abuja. May we speak in private?" Layla weighed the request, looked around the room where waiting had made everyone expert at listening without looking, then gestured to a small office with a humming fridge and a shelf of labeled syringes. "You have 2 minutes," she said, sitting, arms folded in the kind of self-embrace people learn when they've had to hold themselves together. Zainab placed the document sleeve on the desk and slid out the photograph first, then the birth certificate, edges smoothed by careful hands. "I went to the house near the edge of Kuta," she said steadily. "I met the caretaker, Bala. I met Mama Sophia. I found these." Layla did not touch the photo at first. Her eyes touched it for her, the way a hand hovers above fire to test if it will burn. When she finally lifted it, her mouth moved without sound. "That scarf," she whispered, thumb tracing the faded pattern. Zainab nodded. "Your mother's. The day she left, she folded it and put it on the drawer as if to say she was coming right back." Layla's jaw tightened. She didn't. "I know," Zainab said. "I'm sorry." She turned the certificate so the name faced its owner. "I came to tell you your father is gravely ill. He asked me to find your mother. When I learned she's gone, he asked me to find you." Silence found the corners of the room and sat down. The fridge hummed louder, like a witness clearing its throat. "They've sent men before," Layla said. "Men who smelled like new tires and lies. They held out money the way you hold out a leash." "I'm not here with money," Zainab replied. "I'm here with a chance to choose. He wants to say sorry with his own mouth. If that is all you allow, it will be enough." Layla's laugh was small and brittle. Where was his mouth when Mama was sick, when the landlord hammered the gate, when the clinic turned us away because cash closed at 4? Zainab did not defend Suleiman. There are apologies that collapse if you try to carry them for the person who owes them. "I can't answer for his absences," she said, "but I've watched him fear something bigger than death, regret. He is asking for time, and time is asking me to ask you." Layla stood and paced once, twice, the way you test a floor before you dance on it. "If I come," she said, "no names, no family, no cameras, no lawyers." "Agreed," Zainab said, grateful that the list sounded like a map rather than a wall. "We go in through staff, we leave if anyone tries to turn your face into a headline." Layla stopped by the door, palm flat against it as though listening to the building's pulse. "I built this life without him," she murmured. "If I go and feel nothing, will you let that be my answer?" "Yes," Zainab said. "Feeling nothing is also a truth." Layla's eyes flicked to the certificate again, then to the photo, then back to Zainab's face, searching for hunger and finding only fatigue braided with intention. "Give me 1 hour," she said quietly. "I need to tell Matron Peace I'm leaving early, and I need to decide what to carry." "Carry only what you can hold while running," Zainab said, half-smile ghosting her mouth. "I'll wait outside." On the ride back toward Abuja, they did not talk much. Road dust put a film over everything except the way Layla kept one hand on the photograph in her lap, thumb circling the baby's knitted cap as if smoothing a wrinkle left by years. Twice she asked about Suleiman's condition. Twice Zainab answered clinically and added nothing poetic. Near the city, traffic thickened like porridge. Zainab texted Matron Funke a single line, "Returning with patient relative, need discreet access," and received a thumbs up that felt like a doorman unlocking a service lift. At Prime Care, they ducked the main reception and slid along a corridor that smelled of chlorine and coffee, past nurses who pretended not to see, past a security man who owed Matron Funke a favor and paid it with a nod. Outside the ICU, 2 guards formed a polite wall. "Only staff." "She is staff," Zainab answered calmly. "Volunteer nurse, matron approved." The guard made a call, listened, then moved an inch. It would have been enough if Farouk hadn't turned the corner with a lawyer and a scowl that practiced itself. He looked from Zainab to Layla, and contempt found its target. "Who is this?" "No one you can speak to," Zainab said, stepping so his gaze hit her shoulder instead of Layla's face. Layla lifted her chin. "I'm here to see a patient," she said mildly, like rivers can be mild before they drown kings. Farouk fired a glare at the guard. The guard looked at the phone as if hoping it would ring again. A door opened down the hall. Matron Funke appeared, starch and backbone. "Problem?" "No, ma'am," Zainab said. "Continuity of care." The matron's eyes took in the tremor under Layla's calm, the way the lawyer's folio bulged, the scent of a story trying to sell itself. "5 minutes," she said, ushering them past the wall. "After that, we become boring bureaucracy again." Zainab squeezed Layla's hand once, signal, not comfort, and pushed the ICU door into a room where machines kept time, and a man waited to learn whether a word like "father" could fit back into his mouth without breaking.
The ICU smelled of chlorhexidine and dawn. Monitors kept a thin metronome, while Suleiman lay pale under an oxygen mask, eyes half-lidded like a man listening for a train he isn't sure will stop. Zainab led Layla to the bedside without ceremony, placed the photo at the foot of the sheet, and said softly, "You asked for a second chance. Here is the person who owns it." Suleiman's gaze drifted from numbers to face and stopped as if memory had finally found the correct door. His hand lifted, tremored, fell, lifted again. Layla did not move at first. Then she stepped close enough for him to see the shape Halima had left in her cheekbones. He fumbled the mask down to his chin. "Halima," he breathed. "No," Layla said, steady. "I'm Layla, your daughter." The word traveled through him like current. He reached, and she let their fingers meet. "I was a coward," he whispered. "I measured my life in square meters and signatures and forgot the door I promised to walk back through." Layla's eyes did not soften. They steadied. "I waited for you," she said. "On birthdays, at clinic queues, at the landlord's gate. You didn't come." Suleiman nodded, accepting the indictment as oxygen. "I should have learned the price of absence sooner. I am learning it now, and I have nothing to trade except the truth I owe you." A cough climbed his chest. Zainab adjusted the mask, checked the line, gave a small bolus per orders, and stood back in the posture of a witness who will not let the room lie. "I loved your mother," he said when breath returned. "I left because my pride spoke a language she wasn't invited to learn. I am sorry," he looked at Layla, not past her, "for the hunger I wrote into your life by choosing my name over your hand." Layla's jaw worked once, twice. "I don't know if I forgive you," she said, voice low. "But I needed to know whether you could say it without a lawyer." Something unclenched in Suleiman's shoulders. Regret had been trying to climb out for years and had finally reached air. He nodded toward the bedside cabinet. "Red folder," he said to Zainab. "Top drawer." She opened it. Handwritten pages banded with a rubber tie, the top labeled in Suleiman's uncertain script. "Final will, to be delivered only if she comes." A yellow note clung to the cover. "Bonkole, wait for Nurse Z." Zainab tucked the folder under her arm. "We'll keep this safe," she said. Voices rose in the corridor. Shoes, authority, entitlement. The door flew inward an inch before Zainab's body stopped it. Farouk's face filled the gap. Anger polished to a public shine. "What is this circus?" he hissed. His gaze slid over Layla and snagged. Recognition didn't come. Denial arrived first, loud and practiced. "Who are you?" "No one you can bully," Layla answered, not raising her voice. "I came to hear the truth."
The lawyer behind Farouk tried to squeeze in with a folder, like a crowbar. Matron Funke's hand landed on the door from the other side, unmovable. "Wait outside," she said, the tone that makes even death adjust its schedule. Farouk threw words, the will, imposters, protocol, but they bounced off the matron's starch and fell useless to the floor. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone camera chirped awake. Security barked. The press, smelling the weather, arrived too quickly, questions already aimed. Is the billionaire's secret child inside? Has the will been changed? Zainab closed the door fully, slid the bolt, and returned to the bed. "We have minutes," she said. Suleiman nodded, breath hitching. He looked at Layla with the urgency of a man who knows clocks are not sentimental. "I do not deserve your mercy. If all you give me is a look that says you heard me, I will go with more than I came." Layla swallowed. "You will not buy me with land or headlines, but you can have this." She put her other hand over his. "I will not let your last thought be that no one came." His breath eased. The monitor steadied, then shivered. A spasm gripped his chest. Alarms woke, thin and insistent. Zainab moved. Airway, mask, suction, ready. Call button tapped twice for the code team she knew they wouldn't need if the heart had already decided. "Suleiman," she called, leaning close. Voice the calm you use to walk someone back from a cliff. He looked once more at Layla, and in that look emptied the last of his explanations and kept only her name. "Layla," he said. She leaned in. "I'm here." He smiled, small, real, then exhaled a long familiarity and did not draw it back. The monitor drew a straight answer. Zainab checked carotid, counted because ritual matters, and lowered her hand. Outside, fists hit the door. Inside, Layla lay.
Farouk's voice cracked through the wood, accusations wearing law, but when Zainab opened the door, a hand's width, what entered first was quiet. She met Farouk's eyes. "He's gone," she said. "Whatever you say next, decide whether you want it to be the first thing your father didn't have to hear." The words stunned the corridor into a brief, honest silence. Then the world resumed. Security clearing reporters, the lawyer regrouping, the matron arranging dignity around a body. Zainab slipped the red folder under her coat and guided Layla to a chair in the corner. "Breathe," she said. Layla did, and when air returned, it brought something unexpected with it. Not absolution, not even ease, but the faint, solid feeling of having chosen her own line in a story she hadn't asked to inherit. The storm arrived on schedule. Cameras first, then headlines, then cousins who'd never called Suleiman Baba when he could still answer. Prime Care's gates became a marketplace for rumors, while the city argued over whether the quiet woman in a clinic blue hoodie was a daughter or a fable. Farouk hired a press team that spoke in bulletins. They called Layla an imposter, Zainab an opportunist, and the red folder alleged. Matron Funke kept the ward sealed and the death clean. Bankole, the lawyer, verified chain of custody like a man who had learned to carry fire without burning his hands. And Zainab walked home with her bag hugged close, not because of money, but because paper, when it tells the truth, can be more dangerous than cash. For a week, the story fed the city. Radio callers measured forgiveness in decibels. Blogs posted grainy stills from a hospital corridor and circled Layla's profile in red. An aunt Zainab hadn't heard from in years texted, "Now you will be rich, remember us." The estate moved faster than grief. Bankole summoned both parties to a neutral conference room where the AC rattled like old intentions. He slit the envelope, flattened Suleiman's handwritten pages, and read into minutes what the dying man had written into courage. 45% to his firstborn child, Layla Halima, remainder among the sons, provisions for staff scholarships, a rider that forbade the sale of the Mama house without unanimous consent. Farouk's face did not change until Bankole read the sticky note aloud. "To my lawyer, only after she comes." And then something small inside him cracked, the part that had hoped this was theater. He demanded DNA. Layla gave blood without ceremony and went back to her clinic as if lineage were a lab value, not a mirror. The result returned the way truth often returns, without fanfare and impossible to argue with. He demanded a second test. The numbers repeated themselves like a verse no silence could erase. The press team fell quiet, the cousins evaporated. Bankole called Zainab to the office alone. He handed her a black envelope that knew where it was going. "From him," he said. Inside, a letter in Suleiman's unsteady script addressed to Nurse Z, a modest check that could retire deaths without changing a soul, and a land deed to a small riverside plot outside Lokoja, annotated in Bankove's tidy hand. Client's personal bequest, not from estate share. Zainab read the letter on the balcony of her one room, where laundry lines made careful geometry of surviving. He wrote like a man who had finally learned to use words for work that money couldn't do. "Thank you for staying when a name would have been easier to serve than a man. Build quiet with this if you wish." She did not cry. She folded the letter as if tucking a child in, and put it where courage lives between shifts. Layla refused interviews. She answered no one's outrage except the fevers that arrived at her clinic each morning. With her share, she didn't buy a mansion, she bought time, extended hours, a backup generator that didn't sputter at dusk, a children's bay with beds that didn't wobble, a little scholarship in Halima's name for girls who wanted to learn to count breaths and not just coins. One evening, Farouk came to Zainab's block without a camera, wearing jeans that looked like he'd learned how to sit. He waited by the stairwell light, cap in his hands like the oldest country's apology. "I was taught to win arguments," he said, when she stopped 3 steps above him, "and I forgot most lives aren't arguments." He looked away, then back. "My mother said your name like a stain this week. I'm tired of inheriting other people's sentences." Zainab listened, not generous, not cruel. "What do you want?" she asked. "To meet her without microphones," he said. "To not fight the house in Mama. To ask if we can choose another way to be a family that doesn't like itself yet." Later he met Layla at the clinic's back door, where the generator hummed and bleach made a clean, stubborn smell. He didn't offer deals, he offered a story she hadn't known. How he'd come home once, 12, heard a man in the study say "beneath us," and learned to step on anything he feared. "I'm trying to unlearn," he said, small. Layla, who had lived an entire adolescence under the weight of someone else's sentence, nodded once. "We'll start with not lying," she said. "That is slow work." In the weeks that followed, the city found another scandal. Headlines moved on. Bankole delivered the court's confirmation. The will stood. Matron Funke posted an internal memo, "No staff to speak to press. Kindness remains policy," and slid a quiet recommendation across Zainab's palm for advanced training, stamped and crisp. Zainab visited the riverside plot on a Sunday morning when the sky had the color of clean sheets. The land met her feet without ceremony, a long breath beside water. She imagined a wooden veranda and rooms where tired people could put their names down for a while without anyone asking to see them. When she told Layla, the younger woman smiled like someone who had just remembered a song from childhood. "Call it what the letter asked you to build," she said. "Quiet." Zainab nodded. They stood by the river, 2 women who had walked through noise to reach a place where the loudest sound was mercy minding its own business.
They opened the place without ribbon or speeches, just a hand-painted sign that said "Quiet" by the river, and a path of swept laterite leading to a veranda that smelled of new wood and palm oil soap. Zainab and Layla had built it with carpenters who measured twice, and widows who knew how to make curtains hang like a promise, with a painter who insisted every door frame carry a thin blue line to remind trouble to behave, and with Bankole arriving one afternoon in shirt sleeves to help lift beds because his father had been a ward orderly and he hadn't forgotten the grammar of service. Matron Funke came on a Sunday bearing a stainless steel trolley and the kind of blessing administrators give when they are proud but pretending it's policy. "No fuss," she said, leaving behind a box of blood pressure cuffs and an envelope with Zainab's training approval, stamped in a blue that felt permanent. They kept the name Kareem off the sign and on a single small plaque inside the office, "In gratitude for a lesson learned late." And they kept the rules simple: phones quiet, shoes off in the reading room, questions optional, tea always hot. People arrived the way pain arrives, some with noise, some with silence. A mechanic who hadn't slept through the night since a road crash took his apprentice. A mid-level civil servant whose chest tightened whenever her boss said urgent because urgency had become a rope. A widow whose house got louder after burial. A teenage boy who stood at the gate and presented a crumpled paper that read in careful block letters, "I heard this is where hearts get fixed." Zainab knelt so they were eye to eye. "You heard right," she said, and led him to a bed by the window where the river made a sound like patient breathing. Layla ran the day room like a ward that believed in mercy as a measurable outcome. She taught a breathing drill she'd adapted from clinic triage: in through the nose for 4, hold 2, out for 6. And a gratitude ritual that didn't bully anyone into cheerfulness. Write a small true thing from today and slip it into a jar. If you can't write, point at the sky, and we'll write cloud. In the late afternoons, she sat under the neem that had come with the land and taught a young volunteer to check a blood pressure cuff, the way you teach someone to handle a bird. Farouk came once, without a lawyer or a suit, just a carton of mosquito nets and an apology he felt in his hands more than his mouth. He stood on the veranda a long time, then found Layla stacking blankets. "I brought these," he said, awkward, as if nets weighed more than failure. "Good," she answered, not unkind. "Stay and tie a few up." He stayed, learned the knot, tangled one, laughed at himself, and left before sunset, shoulders 1 degree less armored. Some evenings, the river turned to copper, and the women would sit on the steps with enamel cups of tea, watching fishermen mutter their way home. Zainab read the letter again sometimes, not because she needed permission to be good at her calling, but because the handwriting reminded her that people can change the direction of their last sentence, and that knowledge sharpened her compassion without blunting her boundaries. On the wall inside the office, they framed 3 small things: the birth certificate copy with the Yusuf and the Kareem side by side, a photograph of a scarf folded on a drawer, and a ledger page where Mama Safisha had once written, "Layla, 7:12 a.m., fingers spread wide, cried strong." On the first rain of the new season, the roof drummed a rhythm that made the beds feel like boats. A woman in the reading room began to cry into a novel and did not apologize. Layla handed her a handkerchief and said, "It's working." And the woman nodded, understanding that healing sometimes sounds like water finally finding a place to go. Before they closed that night, a courier arrived dusty from the road, carrying a small package addressed to "Quiet by the River." Inside was a cassette player and a tape labeled in Suleiman's hand, "For when you are not angry anymore." Farouk came the next day. They pressed play together, and his father's voice, thinner and braver than wealth had ever allowed, said, "Build not higher, but better." They didn't clap, didn't cry. They put the player on the office shelf beside the plaque and the jar of small true things. Weeks became a pattern. Mornings of blood pressures and tea,
Afternoons of naps and conversations that ended without anyone having to be clever. Evenings of river light. One night a power cut darkened the rooms, and the river shone brighter for it. Someone started a song. Others joined, and Zainab, standing in the doorway with a flashlight she didn't need to switch on, felt the exact thing Suleiman had asked her to build settle into the boards. A quiet that was not the absence of noise, but the presence of care. When she finally locked the door, the sign creaked lightly in the breeze, and she touched the wood the way you touch a forehead for fever. "We're all right," she told it. And across the compound, Layla's window lamp clicked off. The river kept its gentle argument with the shore, and the house held, ready for whoever needed to come and lay a name down without fear.